Information Risk with David Lotion, powered by Insight Jam.
Hey, it's Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review, and we are back with another episode of Information Risk with David Lotion, who is not only a Solutions Review expert in our collection of enterprise technology experts. He's also the president of Knowledge Integrity, data strategy consultant, and just an absolute wealth of knowledge around information risk, data governance. Last time we spoke, David, we went through a whole collection of information risk categories. And I know you wanted to bring some examples as we move through this series with you. And I think today we've got an example that falls under the compliance risk category. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. What I wanted to do was focus on where there's a potential vulnerability that creeps into an organization's capabilities to respond to some kind of regulatory request that actually hides a huge amount of potential complexity in their ability to take advantage of the data architecture. And so we'll give an example. It's an example that I think is going to hit home with a lot of people who are listening to us today. But I think it's, again, what's real interesting is to look at it from the perspective of where is the risk associated with the information.
Yeah, and I know the subject matter you're going to bring up here, and I think it's absolutely a great topic to talk about. So why don't you lead right into it, and I'll happily add some color commentary.
Thanks. So I actually have a subtitle for this week's episode, which is, "Am I watching my TV or is my TV watching me?" And so I want to refer to a technology that a lot of TV companies that are building TVs use, which is called automatic content recognition. Now for sure we know that a lot of televisions come along with a remote, and on the remote there's a button that you can press that's a voice control, and when you press the voice control, you're telling the television, and in these smart TVs, what you're telling is, go find Netflix for me, or go to Amazon Prime, or go to my local cable provider or Fios provider, or one of those things, and look up a particular type of television program or a movie or whatever. And there's this other aspect, this other technology that's called automatic content recognition, and I'm going to quote from an article that appeared in the Washington Post, and I'm sure we're going to be able to provide all the references after the fact, along with the release of the podcast. But there's a technology where what the companies can do is capture what's called a fingerprint of what is actually on your television screen, and it looks like a bunch of bundles of pixels that are scattered around the screen, which the television actually converts into a representation, some kind of signature or a string of numbers, and that it sends those numbers, that signature, back to the television company, along with the identifiers associated with your television. So if you were monitoring the news, today is February 23rd, 2024. If you're monitoring the news the last couple of days, you may have seen that company Vizio, which is a company that makes televisions, is being acquired. I have to try to recall what the other company is that's doing the acquiring, but it's being acquired not necessarily because it's a company that makes televisions, but because they're able to collect a lot of information. Walmart. It's kind of hard to forget Walmart. So Walmart is acquiring Vizio. Vizio is a manufacturer of smart TVs. Now, what they do is they collect this fingerprint, and it's sending the signature of what you're watching, every couple of minutes, or maybe even every 30 seconds or whatever. And so the company that is producing the television is keeping track of the screens that are being watched. So it's not just what did you say into the voice remote, but rather what did you actually decide you're going to watch, and how long are you watching it, and what are the things that you're looking at, and maybe even if you pause the screen. How long did you pause the screen for? And where are you looking at this? And what time are you looking at these things? Because they keep track of it by television. So there's a huge amount of information that is being produced. And people don't really realize this because when they turn on their TV the first time and it walks through a bunch of things for setting it up, it says, here's a list of policies that are associated with using the TV. And do you accept? And most people just blindly just press on the accept because they want to watch their TV. They don't want to sit through, 15 reams of text trying to figure out, what they're actually agreeing to.
This is also, one of the things that you do when you set up your TV initially is what it asks you to do is it asks you to connect it, because it's a smart TV, connect it to your Wi-Fi. And that's when everything goes off the rails, because that's basically creating a connector directly to Vizio or Samsung or LG or whoever your television manufacturer is. And it is food for thought with regard to how do you want to engage with your television? Do you need it to be connected to Wi-Fi? Or do you need some other device, which again, streaming sticks like Apple TV or Roku or whatever the other ones are, they're connecting to the internet as well. They're monitoring you as well. There's any number of ways that you're being profiled. They come with, some sort of remote control, voice operated remote control that's listening. It's a slippery slope, and it does. It should give everybody pause as to what they want to connect and what they need to connect to the internet. Just because something can connect to the internet doesn't necessarily mean that you need to connect it to the internet in order for you to get the value out of it. I would argue, and actually in my particular case, I don't connect my television to the internet. I use a streaming stick, which then feeds a HDMI connection and kind of sideswipes all that. But the television doesn't like that.
Right. Well,
it's not connected to the internet.
What's interesting is that it's intended to be, it's one of these things where it is presented as a convenience. And so, we bought a nice TV, and the TV itself has connectivity to all the streaming services. So you can connect to Amazon Prime and to Netflix and to Disney Plus and Hulu and all those through the television itself. Or you could do what you just described, which is you can connect to it through a separate, like another streaming source, like a Fire TV stick or an Apple TV. But even so, if you want to be able to get and again, here's where the problems lie, which is when you want to get a connection to the company so that you can download the most latest version of the system, so that you get better resolution on your screen, or you get some other kinds of services that you can connect your TV to, or maybe to be able to stream through Bluetooth or whatever. You are going to have to make some decision about whether you are or are not willing to connect your television to the streaming server, to the internet. And even if you don't, you're absolutely right that I've got 5 sticks, different things that are connected into my TV, and they're all doing the same thing. I wouldn't doubt that my Apple TV device or that Roku was mentioned in that article that was in the Washington Post. They all do these things, right? So they're all capturing what you're doing, and what again, it's not the behavior that you have, which is I selected to watch Family Ties or whatever the most recent hot TV show is, but rather it's looking at what's on the screen. It's really looking at the images, not the action, the transactions. So what's interesting then is that you got to look at what did you actually sign when you signed up to using these products. And what I did is, and again, like I said before, I'm going to put all the links into a note so that we can attach it to the podcast. So if people want to look at this, they'll be able to. But I looked at, so we have a Samsung TV, and I thought, okay, let's take a look at what Samsung says. So Samsung has a privacy policy, and these privacy policies are designed by and written by attorneys and policy people whose job it is to make sure that they are covering all their bases when it comes to ensuring that they're compliant with the jurisdictional imposition of privacy laws in different areas. So in this privacy policy, Samsung said, I'm going to read right from this so that you get it exactly. It says our services, and this is the section on information we collect automatically. And it says our services collect some data automatically. When you use the services, we may obtain information by automated means, such as through browser cookies, pixels, web server logs, web beacons, and other technologies. Among other purposes, these technologies help us remember your information so you will not have to re-enter it, track and understand how you use and interact with the services, tailor the services around your preferences, manage and measure the usability of the services, understand the effectiveness of our communications, and otherwise enhance the services. Now, just to take a breath there for a second, that is very cloudy language, because they refer to what they're providing to you as the services with capital S, and they're saying that they're collecting all this information because they want to tailor the services around your preferences and enhance the services and manage and measure the usability of the services. But really, that's a little bit of a code word for saying we want to take your data, we want to be able to analyze what you're doing so that we can try to provide you with something that is beneficial, presumably to you, but also beneficial to us, the corporation. And that typically means something like we're analyzing your data to try to sell you something, or we're collecting data about you so we can sell it to some of our trading partners. And so there's a lot of stuff buried in that language.
Yeah, and I think that's the dirty secret of the digital age across every device we carry, everything that's connected somewhere, every app we load on every device we interact with, and ultimately, all of that data is being sprayed multiple times over to massive data centers that are aggregating all of that data, not only against you as an individual profile many times over in many different data repositories, but then aggregated against you as a representative of a demographic niche within their massively large data sets, in order, as you said, and as they readily admit in the user agreement, in order to, I don't think they say it out loud, but in order to monetize that.
Exactly. That's the exact word.
That's what they're doing. You're giving them access to data that has value to them, and they're monetizing that data. This has been going on since the internet, and it's one of the things that makes me crazy. It's like, we all have data that has value. We all represent data that has value, and companies extract that data from us and monetize it on their behalf, and we get, quote unquote, enhanced services.
Enhanced services,
I guess is what you're saying. The exchange for us is no monetary value, but this vague and less valuable improvement of services.
And I'm going to withhold judgment for a bit on this, because for two reasons. Number one, this shouldn't be a surprise. Although, I think to many people it is a surprise, but it shouldn't be a surprise, because this is the way businesses have been migrating. And I'm not gonna condemn a company for wanting to collect information about what you like to be able to sell you things that you might like, because that's if we went back to the mid 1800s and people go down to the general store, the guy who's running the general store is probably thinking, okay, well, Doug came in and bought a bunch of horseshoes, and David came in and bought some oats, and maybe some other people came in and bought a feed bag, and it sounds like a lot of my customers are got horses. Maybe I should create another section, specifically for horse owners, where I've got even better horseshoes and maybe some different flavors of oats and that kind of thing. So it's not like a business doesn't want to do this. I mean, they want to, number one, they want to increase their sales, for example, but they want to do it by selling you stuff that you want, not necessarily, this image of, the companies are coercing you into making decisions about things that you really don't want to do. I mean, maybe some of them do, but let's say legitimately it's okay for these companies to want to be able to collect the information and be able to provide that some use of the analysis truly to better your services. So, again, without condemnation, the question that I'm going to raise is a little deeper, and we're going to get into it in a minute. What I want to do is kind of finish up a little bit about the information that is being automatically collected. And again, I'm reading from the Samsung privacy policy. It says information we may collect automatically includes information about your device, MAC address and IP address that's associated with connectivity to the internet, log information, device model, hardware model, IMEI number, serial number, subscription information, device settings, connections to other devices, mobile network operator, web browser characteristics, app usage information, sales code, access code, current software version, MNC, subscription information, randomized, non-persistent, resettable device identifiers, such as personalized service ID and advertising IDs, including Google Ad ID. Then your use of the services, including clickstream data, your interactions with the services, including the web pages you visit, search terms, and the apps, services, and features you use, download, or purchase, the pages that lead or refer you to the services, how you use the services, and dates and times of use of the services, and your use of third-party websites, apps, and features that are connected. So what I was referring to before about this automatic content recognition mechanism, which is capturing a signature of the content that is actually being projected onto the screen, that would get bundled under either clickstream data or what do we have here? The use services and features you use, right? It's bundled in there without really being explicit about it, which is, I think, why they drew a lot of criticism a few years back in that they were saying that they're going to do it. They're just not explaining the detail to which they're actually going to be collecting that information. But the scenario here is that, okay, I've agreed to all this, and they're collecting this information, and so what's happening is you buy a product. Let's say you buy that television, and you register your device by either by implicitly by logging into the website or connecting it to the internet and agreeing to this. And what it does is it's got a serial number, it's got a unique identifier associated with the television, and they can connect that television to you because somehow they'll manage to link the device ID to your identity. So basically, when you have connected your new television to the internet, it gets allocated a MAC. It's got a MAC address, gets allocated an IP address internally to your home, but then it gets mapped out to the IP address that is linked to your home internet or whatever. And so essentially, when you turn on that television, they can't tell exactly whether it's you or your wife or your teenager who's watching TV, but they pretty much know that generally the household that is communicating with this television. And so here's what we have. We have unique identification and linking of a television that is collecting data about its users, and it is storing that. It's streaming that data and storing that and persisting that data, and it's linked directly to at least one individual who's the account holder that has made the agreement with the provider of the television. So I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to hand it back to you, Doug, for a sec.
Yeah, so we're going to take a quick little break, and when we come back, I want to get into what we can do and what are the implications for and our responsibility ultimately with regard to our compliance risk data.
Want more Insight Jam? Follow us on Instagram for exclusive content like a daily dose of best practices and buying advice from industry experts and leading solution providers. Or subscribe to our YouTube channel for long-form highlights from our expert panel discussions. And if you prefer to listen, please rate and review the Insight Jam podcast on Apple, Spotify, or Google. The Solutions Review team is hard at work collecting the best enterprise technology information from around the globe, so don't miss out. Now, let's get back to the show.
All right, David, we have unearthed something that I think, honestly, most everybody is aware of and kind of glazes over because they know, the agreements are just so deep that there's ultimately, you either agree or you don't. There's no real kind of like, well, I'm gonna push back on these sections here. There's really no way to do that. You either agree or you don't get the service, you don't get the app, you don't get the. So what are the things? So government now can step in, right, and start to make policies, and some state governments have, some larger, like the EU, Canada, the United States is working on these things, but the individual states have started to do things. What do you see happening on the front of kind of protecting the consumer here?
So that's a great question, and I think that actually is the crux of this question of where's the compliance risk that we're talking about, and why is that an information risk? And California is an example. California, a couple of years ago, they passed what was called the California Consumer Privacy Act. It's been updated. It's called CPRA now. It's privacy regulation, et cetera, something like that. But what it says is that it's similar to the GDPR, the General Data Protection regulation in the European Union, which basically says that data subjects have rights, and that the organization that is collecting information about a data subject, which might be a customer or a vendor or whoever it is, the data subject has certain rights to just understand what the company is going to be doing with that data. So companies need to acknowledge that, and a good example of where we see this every day is every single time you go to a website, it will tell you that it's collecting cookies and ask you to accept the cookies or to modify your preferences associated with cookies. And that's just one manifestation of compliance with some of these privacy laws. But more to the point, in the California law, it says that that the data subject has particular rights. And I'm going to read again from, there's an addendum to Samsung's privacy policy, which it says if you're a California resident, click here. And again, I'm going to provide the links. There is a section in this addendum that says California consumer privacy rights. And again, I'm going to read from this. It says you have certain choices. This is if you're a California resident. You have certain choices regarding our use and disclosure of your personal information to the extent applicable to each service as described below. And I'm just going to focus on one, which is access. You have the right to request that we disclose to you the personal information we have collected about you, including the categories of personal information, the categories of sources from which the personal information is collected, the business or commercial purposes for collecting, selling, or sharing, for cross-content behavioral advertising purposes, personal information, the categories of third parties to whom we disclose personal information, and the specific pieces of personal information we've collected about you. And so this is part of the law, and they need to abide by this. But really what it says is that if you are a California resident and you have a Samsung TV or whatever manufacturer you have the right to request that the company tell you what personal information they've collected about you and why they're collecting that information and what they're doing with that information. And again, the way that some of these things are phrased in their privacy rights section of this policy makes it a little cloudy, because it might be very simple for them to just say, okay, well, we collect this information and we use it to try to sell you things, and that's the end of the story. But what I want to do is kind of look at this in a little more detail and what it actually means, because it's no longer a question about what do our customers do. It's really something about what are we doing with the data about any particular customer that we have.
I know you've sent over some notes, and I'm looking at them right now.
Well,
Apologize
I'm going to
for
jump right in there
reading.
because I'm going to tell you what I want to say, which is how, your question, you should say to me is, okay, well, how many customers does Samsung have? Okay. So
Yeah, no, I'm looking at the numbers right now. This is fascinating stuff. So why don't you break it down?
okay. So everything that I'm looking at, I'm talking about here, I pulled from some article that I found on the web. A couple of years ago, there was an article. It was a case study that Amazon Web Services provided on their website that says that Samsung had migrated from Oracle to Amazon Aurora, which is one of the database services that are on AWS, using the database migration services. And the title of the article is Samsung migrates 1.1 billion users across 3 continents from Oracle to Amazon Aurora. So Samsung has 1.1 billion users across 3 different continents. And I think that's Asia, the U.S. basically. I don't recall. I have to go into the article to actually look at it. But also, let's think about this. It's not necessarily they're not all television purchasers. There's lots of Samsung phones.
I'm sure
most of them are phones.
Majority of them are probably phones.
Yes, they're probably mostly phones. But just to give you a scale of the number of customers that Samsung has, I need to know, when you are watching your TV and you want to say, okay, Samsung, tell me what data do you have about me? It's not only about the TV data. It's, well, wait a second, does Doug have one of our phones? Did Doug buy one of our tablets? Does he have one of our washing machines? Because they make washing machines and refrigerators that are collecting information. So when you think about it, it's not just along one line of business. Now, all right, let's drill down a little bit. How many televisions does Samsung sell? And projections for U.S. smart TV market in 2024 is 31 million units. So let's kind of estimate. We'll call it like 30 million units a year. And another article says that in 2020, Samsung's market share was 28% in the United States of the television market. So let's be conservative. We'll estimate. We'll lower that to like 25%. It also makes the math a lot easier. So let's say 25% of 30 million televisions per year is about 7.5 million televisions per year that they sell in the United States. And California has about 30 million residents, so that's about 1/10. Or again, I'm fudging the math because it makes it easier. It's about 1/10 of the U.S. population. So let's assume we've got every year they're selling about 750,000 Samsung TVs each year. Let's drop that to 700,000. Let's call it 500,000 just to make it even easier, and say over the last 5 years, Samsung has sold 2.5 million televisions in California. So all those televisions, are keeping track of what all their viewers are watching and streaming that data. I mean, it's a huge amount of data, right? But what's interesting? So again, what's interesting is this privacy right of access says, well, any of these 30 million residents of California can contact Samsung at any time and say, tell me everything you know about, what personal information do you have and how is it being collected and et cetera. How many people do you think California has more than 39 million residents. I'm checking my notes. How many requests do you think happens per year?
It's probably not a lot.
No, it's not. I actually found their report. They have a link to a report, a little table that says how many requests did they get. In 2022, they got 3,397 requests about access. So that's not a lot of requests. Given that there's 39 million people there, it's 1 out of every million or so. I'd have to get the calculator out. It's like 3,300 divided by 39 million. We'll drop a bunch of zeros there. Maybe it's smaller.
1%.
Yeah, maybe I'm getting the calculator out. So if I had 3,000 divided by 30 million, that is 0.0001. So that is 1/100th of 1% of the population is actually doing this. And so you're going to guess, okay, Samsung they probably can handle this manually by having somebody, we got a request, now it's your job to go and track this down. But let's say people suddenly become aware that they're allowed to do this and that they can make this request. There's a need for scalability. And this is where, and this is the crux of the whole question, which is the compliance risk that we're talking about, which is here's a huge corporation that sells many, many different types of products in many different lines of business to billions of customers. And at some point, any one of those customers can say, tell me about
Get
all
me my dossier.
Yes, show me all the information that you have about me. And it would be one thing if I were keeping that in a file cabinet and I would just go over.
I'd love to see that report, by the way. I would love to see what that report
I tried
looks
to find that too. If I can find that, I'll also get a link to that too. But the real question is, in any organization, how many different places are they keeping data about any particular individual, and how easy is it to find that data? And this is where I think we've got a technology and a data issue, which is, let's say they have 5 lines of business: telephones, TVs, whatever other washing machines and drying machines, kitchen appliances, etc. Let's say there's 5 of them, and each one of them, they got a massive database. And when people fill out their registration information, like I do this all the time, and I'm like the primary example of variance in names, because I go by my middle name. I don't go by my first name. So, in some databases I've got, David is my first name. In some cases it's actually got Howard, which is my real first name, which I've never gone by in my entire life. But if you try to link those records together, you wouldn't necessarily be able to ensure that you would find all the records that refer to my interactions with that company without having to scan through all that data to figure out where it is. Now this is where tools come in, and there's mechanisms for what we call master data management and identity resolution or administrative record linkage. And the whole goal of those types of tools and technologies is to manage within the organization a uniquely, the ability to materialize a consistent view of data about any uniquely identifiable entity. So let's say you're in a healthcare provider system, which it might be 5 hospitals and a bunch of healthcare providers that have their independent offices, and then you've got maybe some urgent care centers as well, and that crops up. Each one of those, there's a thing called an enterprise master patient index, and when you walk into the urgent care center, you tell them who you are, and they can find all your patient data because they've got this master data index that collects all the information about you. But that's because that's a more mature environment where they've collected a lot of data over many, many years, and they have a bunch of mechanisms to be able to collect and connect all those records together. But if you were a bunch of independent companies that are glommed together in a conglomerate, who knows whether, Doug, I don't know whether Doug is your name or Douglas is your name, but if Douglas is your...
Gordon, actually.
So there you go. You might show up in one database as Gordon.
Douglas is my middle name. So I know. My dad has the same name as I do, and my grandfather had the same name. And it creates all kinds of weirdness.
So there's that same problem. It's the opposite part of the problem, which is how do you differentiate between you and your father and your grandfather in these databases? And I have the same problem too, which is that I have a cousin whose name is also David Lotion, and there's another guy in the country whose name is also David Lotion. And I keep getting emails for both of those people because there's this presumption that, it's not very, it's not very common name. You say davidlotion@gmail.com, but it comes to me, even though that's not the people that they're talking to. And in fact, when one person went to a hotel, he said they want to credit his stay on his frequent stay account, and he gave them his name, which actually is my name as well, and they put it on my account. And then they sent me a survey asking me how I enjoyed my stay, and I was a little surprised because I thought it might have been an identity theft situation. But now let's say you're Samsung, and instead of getting 3,000 requests a year, you're getting 300,000 requests a year, because now all of a sudden everybody's waking up and realizing that their data is being co-opted. How are you going to create an environment where you can find all the information about any particular individual of these 1 billion customers, to find all the data about any one particular one, when you've got 10, or 100 or maybe 1,000 different databases or data systems where there's potentially information about any individual in any single one of them? And this is the compliance risk. It's a vulnerability.
Well, and so I want to make sure everybody's picking up on how this is now shifting. So we're no longer talking about kind of the implications to a consumer. This is now an implication to the corporation, to an organization, and it's not just the largest organizations in the world. I don't think people would have a lot of sympathy for Samsung if all of a sudden there was a crush of requests that caused them to have to, hire people and spend money monitoring or delivering all those requests. I think, it is what it is. But that has implications for every organization collecting any data within California. And that can be, quite frankly, incredibly onerous and risky for an organization that just isn't able to scale against those types of requests, correct?
Yeah, that's why I was saying before that I was going to withhold judgment. I mean, yes, we might not agree that it's a nice thing for a company to be collecting a lot of information so that it can analyze what you're doing, but they're doing it. So my real question is if you are one of these companies and that you are at some point you are going to have to respond to these requests and be able to find all that data, how are you going to ensure to let's say an auditor or to a jurisdictional oversight person that you have correctly responded to every single request that you've gotten? So when Doug, when you send a letter to Samsung, you say, give me all the information, on the one hand, they may not find all that data because you are registered as Gordon somewhere. And number two, so the company is not providing all the data that they have. Number two, they might link your record. Let's say they're a little overzealous. They link your record to your father's record, and now they're telling you that your father's actually watching, Murder, She Wrote every single night, and that is an exposure of his personal information, which is, while you guys are related, he might not want you to know that he's watching that television program every single night, and in fact, maybe my cousin doesn't want me to know the things that he's watching, but they might be telling me that because they've now included his information in mine because they haven't correctly linked those records together. So this is where there's a need for a comprehensive and governed master data management or master data index system that is trustworthy and is auditable and has an integrated governance within the architecture.
Yeah, this is. We're going to take a break. We're going to take a break right now, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about how we kind of find our way through this quagmire of compliance and data collection and risk. So bear with us for just a few seconds more.
Solutions Review is inviting you to join InsightJam.com. What started a few years ago as a social media event to celebrate enterprise technology has now grown into an always-on tech community with live events, discussions, videos, vendor showcases, and industry resources. Our vetted roster of experts, thought leaders, and analysts are sharing tips and tricks daily. So if you're interested in getting involved, join the long list of companies and brands who have already participated by visiting InsightJam.com today. Now back to the show.
All right, David. So we've got some risk exposure for corporations capturing data, and we've got multiple governmental entities with varying compliance requirements globally. And now you have, let's remove the consumer for a moment. Where do you get to enforcement? Where do you get to squaring the circle for these organizations? I'm sure a lot of these organizations are just plain confused about how they can do all this and where the data actually starts to cross geographic and compliance lines, and then ultimately, what are the implications for enforcement?
So there's lots of challenges here, and the first challenge is exactly what you just raised, which is enforcement. Which is, you've got these laws. It's not really clear who is empowered to enforce these laws, and so typically when you see some kind of enforcement action, it's usually very large companies, and it's large amounts of money, and it's based on wholesale activities as opposed to onesie twosie requests. But I don't think that's...
Well, it almost feels, and I'm sorry to jump in,
go
but
ahead.
it almost feels, because the examples that have occurred almost feel like a fee from the entity to the large corporation that has. It's almost as if we know you're doing something with this data that is not in compliance, and so we're just going to hit you with this massive charge. But the devil of the details, I think, is very loose, and it's almost like, well, it doesn't really matter necessarily. I don't know. That's my sense, and we're really just trying to kind of extract effectively a tax or some other fee from this large entity, and I think we all know who those are.
Right. I mean, if you look at the news, you'll see that the companies that are being imposed, that have fines imposed upon them, they're done at a relatively general level. But if you start looking at some of these laws that are involved with privacy, there may be scenarios where the data subject is owed some kind of remediation. And so, yes, I can go to you and I can say, tell me how you use, what data you have and how you're using it. I also will have the right to say, stop using it. But then what happens after that? And if in an equitable environment, you would expect that if I can then demonstrate to a jurisdictional authority that my privacy rights have been overlooked or ignored, then the company should have to, instead of paying a fine to the government, they should have to pay for the cost of fixing somebody's identity theft scenarios, or fixing some kind of harm. Let's say there's some behavior that a person does that then was somehow leaked. And by the way, if you look at some other articles, they talk about how there are some security flaws in the way some of these devices are collecting and sending data, that a relatively straightforward cyber attack could then connect into that stream and pull all that data out. So I'm not even talking about the cybersecurity risks. I'm really talking about the ability to say, well, it would be one thing if I'm some major corporation and the European Union is imposing some kind of multi-million-dollar fine, which to me is literally pocket change, because we make billions of dollars, and if you charge me $5 million, that's not really a big deal. But once you get into a scenario where there's a class action suit against some organization because they've demonstrated a pattern of inability to comply with a regulation, and people have been harmed, and now instead of $5 million, it's $5 billion, because that's what the suit is alleging. And now you've got, this whole legal and compliance scenario where, what I want to be able to do as any kind of organization is to identify where those vulnerabilities are and ensure that I've done the best that I can to be able to demonstrate that I'm trying to abide by the rules. And so what the implication is that if you are an organization that has to abide by, say, the California privacy law, you need to be able to demonstrate that you can arbitrarily have a data environment that allows anybody to do a search on an individual's identifying information, to be able to find all the data that has been collected about that individual and be able to produce that into some kind of report, and then be able to provide that back to the requester or to the data subject who asked for that data. And that means having a master data environment. It means being able to do identity resolution. So, these are platform decisions. That's not just okay, well, I can go out and I can buy a product and it will do it for me. It is a platform decision. It requires a lot of work to develop the processes around ensuring that every time somebody signs up for another service from the company, that we initially determined that the customer already exists as a customer in the environment, and that we were able to connect this new service that the customer has acquired to that customer's profile, to be able to keep track of all the different touch points within the organization where an individual's information is being collected, to keep track of all the touch points in the organization where data is being shared or being given to a data partner. It means when an individual has made a request to opt out of data being shared, it means being able to carry that information or that obligation along with the data that is being shared, to be able to say, we've already given, let's say we've given data to a trading partner, and then the data subject says, stop sharing my data. Well, you need to now notify all the other people that you have shared that data with to say, you need to eliminate that individual from your data set. So there's a lot of process, there's a lot of architecture, there's a lot of technology. And, some companies will just kind of throw up their hands and say, okay, well, then we're not going to use that data. Well, if you do that, now you've got a different problem, which is, we were collecting all that data in the first place because we want to analyze customer behavior so we can provide them with better services. But now you're saying, well, these privacy laws say that we can't do that. So we're just going to shut that whole division down, all the analytics and the data scientists and the AI people.
Yeah. So I want to put this in perspective because my take on this is that the natural reaction to the evolution of technology and in particular mobile connected devices, and ultimately, expanding into smart devices like televisions and so forth. But ultimately, I think the phone and other tablet-like devices was the kind of driver in the early 2010s for GDPR, right? And GDPR came on at the EU level. I think California picked up on it and went down their path. Canada picked up on it and went down their path. I think the federal government has kind of thrown up their hands and said, let the states sort it all out, though I think they'll be coming to that again in a bit. Anyway, there was this kind of rush of we need to protect people against this digital harvesting that's happening. And it's a very aggressive harvesting. And all that was proceeding as it should, at the pace that it should, typically with, kind of initial compliance regulations kicking in and so forth. But then what we all know happened, which is this massive worldwide global pandemic absolutely shut things down across the board. And if you were to ask me, I would say that it basically gave everybody a get out of jail free card for this conversation that we're having right now, at least for several years. And now I think as things are starting to get back to normal, and more to the point, as we see things even go further more sophisticated with regard to technology advancements, particularly around AI, and the data implications there. This is now going to become a very salient solution issue for organizations pretty quickly. And I think the AI conversation is going to drive a real hard look at this sort of compliance. And I think you're going to see all kinds of ancillary compliance and regulation around the data there as well. So while we have a few more minutes, let's talk about, how an let's move it down from the world's largest organizations. Let's assume they've got, waves of people and lawyers and other ways, lobbyists and so forth, that they can kind of manage their way through all that. What is it for the smaller, organization, the mid-size organization that quite frankly is capturing data, and they're honestly, if they're doing anything on the web digitally, they're capturing data globally across jurisdictions worldwide. So what would you say is the way they should start to think about this sort of thing?
So you have to think about this not from a technology perspective, but from the business perspective. And the reason I say that is that a lot of companies have done master data management projects, and many of them do not live up to the expectations. So it's not a question of, can I go get the technology and implement the technology and then I'm done, but rather, where are the scenarios where we have the greatest exposure to some kind of problem? And so, for a small business, they probably are not collecting massive amounts of data, but they're probably collecting some data that is necessarily needs to be accessible when somebody makes one of these requests. I think it's when you start getting into these growing businesses, or the medium-sized ones that are not your global conglomerates, but rather companies that have a number of different products or lines of business, and have the ability to collect data, and yet are still thinking in a traditional perspective about the way businesses work, which is we our lines of business operate independently, and we just kind of roll up their P&L to the corporate bottom line. And I'm going to go back to something that you referred to before, which was during the pandemic, things changed, and one of the things that became a major driver was this concept of multi-channel customer engagement, because instead of, customer would either order online, before the pandemic, or they would go to a store and they buy something in the store. Now, all of a sudden you've got people who don't want to go to a store, but they want to get the thing that they want, and they don't want to wait for 5 days for it to be shipped. So they would go to the website, and the website would say, oh, you can order it through the website, but you can get it put into your trunk of your car if you do curbside pickup. And that became, a scenario where you've got individuals who used to be interacting with two different lines of business independently. Now there's a need to be able to merge that into a single customer view. So on the one hand, we have this desire to have increased ability for cross organization or cross silo data sharing, which is a positive driver for master data management. And then you have the need to be able to address compliance, which is it's yet another driver for master data management. But they've got two different areas where value is being added. One is ensuring auditable compliance, that's the privacy issue, and the other is improved customer experience. And that's from an opportunity perspective, because if I can capture more of a customer's purchases, then that's going to be beneficial for my organization. So there's multiple drivers. The question then becomes, where do you start? And I think that's exactly where you start. You start at the business side, which is where are the business scenarios that can benefit in some way from having shared information about uniquely identifiable entities, meaning customers or providers or products or whatever it is. In any of these scenarios, it's got to, if it's more than one area, then it just increases the business case. But I also need to have well-defined metrics that I'm using to evaluate that value.
Yeah. So who in the organization do you see kind of needing to lead this this strategy?
So, well, I'll tell you who shouldn't be leading the strategy. That's
Good.
that's the IT department, and that's actually why a lot of these initiatives don't satisfy the needs or don't come to anything, because they're truly technology driven. So, if your concern is primarily about legal compliance, then the chief risk officer should own it. If it's about improving customer experience, then maybe it's the person in charge of sales or sales and marketing, or maybe there's a chief customer officer. I don't know if that's a term that has caught on, but again, the place it shouldn't be is in technology, because technologists will, they understand what needs to be done. They just don't understand necessarily how it's supposed to interoperate with the way the business runs.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think you're talking about it touching a lot of parts of an organization, from not only the legal and compliance and technology areas, but customer relationship management. I mean, I would suggest there's probably a lot of data that sits in a CRM system or an ERP system or some other type of system that is, and that's the rub, right? It's where does the data sit? Not only what data have you captured, but where is it all?
Yeah, and that thankfully you are seeding what might be our next conversation, which is talking about data literacy and data awareness, and how has that become impacted by this concept of information risk. So thanks for foreshadowing our one of our future conversations.
Yeah. So let's put a bow on this one, and we'll jump to the next one next time. But what are the takeaways here for everybody with regard to this compliance risk category?
So I if I were to be making some recommendation, it would be that if you are not clear about whether you are adequately responding or able to respond to requests that are mandated under laws, you might want to look at what the requirements are supposed to be, and where the gaps are, and where you may be at risk of an auditor or some kind of examiner looking at what you're doing and calling you on the carpet for that. And that requires somebody who's not just data savvy, but somebody who understands both how the business runs, how the business uses data, where data is being managed, and how that the implications of how those things all operate together can lead to potential exposure.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And again, I think this is going to be a conversation that isn't going to go away. I would expect other states to start to jump in, and I think the compliance issues are only going to get more complicated as other states start to have their own individual frameworks similar to what California has done. So it's a fascinating time. I mean, it's another one of those evolving technology challenges that continue to emerge, and it makes life at Solutions Review a wonderful thing. David, thanks very much for the time today. I'm looking forward to our next conversation in a couple of weeks. We'll dig in on another one of our categories of information risk. But until then, we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds great. Thanks.